Before Egypt became a refuge, it was a prison. Before a throne, there was a pit. Before reconciliation, there was blood on a coat of many colors. The story you're about to hear was written in the stars before it unfolded on earth. A divine blueprint hidden in dreams, whispered through angels and fulfilled through the most unlikely vessels. God spoke to a fugitive sleeping on a stone and showed him a ladder connecting heaven to earth. Decades later, he spoke through that man's son in an Egyptian dungeon, revealing mysteries that would alter the fate of nations. This is the prophecy of Jacob and Joseph, two men who carried the weight of God's promise through deception, exile, slavery, and betrayal. Every pit was preparation. Every prison was positioning. Every tear watered the seeds of a salvation they couldn't yet see. Watch as divine sovereignty weaves through human failure, transforming a family's darkest sins into the instrument of their deliverance. The coat will be torn, but the promise cannot be broken. The son will be sold, but the blessing will be multiplied. This is how God writes history, not despite our brokenness, but through it. The journey begins now. Isaac had grown old. His eyes were dim, and he could no longer see. Death felt near, and there was something important he needed to do before his time came. As we read in Genesis 27:1-4, Isaac called his oldest son Esau and said to him, "My son." And Esau answered, "Here I am." Isaac continued, "Behold, now I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die." This was the moment Esau had been waiting for his entire life. The blessing of the firstborn was not just words, it carried authority, inheritance, and the promise of leadership over the family. Esau immediately took his bow and headed into the open country to hunt wild game for his father. But someone else was listening. Rebekah, Isaac's wife and the mother of both Esau and Jacob, had heard every word her husband spoke. Her heart had always favored Jacob, the younger twin. Now, as Genesis 27:5-10 tells us, Rebekah went quickly to find Jacob. She said to him, "Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison and make me savory meat, that I may eat, and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death." Jacob hesitated. He knew his brother well. According to Genesis 27:11-12, Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, "Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing." But Rebekah was determined. She told him in Genesis 27:13, "Upon me be thy curse, my son, only obey my voice, and go fetch them to me." Jacob obeyed his mother. He went and got 2 young goats, and Rebekah prepared them exactly the way Isaac loved. The plan was set in motion. A mother's favoritism was about to change the course of history. Rebekah worked quickly. She took the best clothes of Esau, the ones he kept at home, and put them on Jacob. But clothing alone would not be enough. Isaac might not see, but he could still touch and smell. Genesis 27:15-16 shows us what happened next. "And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, and upon the smooth of his neck. The goat skins felt rough, like Esau's hairy skin. The smell of the fields clung to Esau's clothes. Jacob was being transformed into his brother. Then Rebekah placed the savory meat and bread she had made into Jacob's hands, and he went to his father. Genesis 27:18-19 records the moment. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I. Who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. Isaac was surprised. How had Esau returned so quickly? As Genesis 27:20 tells us, Isaac asked his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? Jacob lied again, saying, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. He used God's name to cover his deception. But Isaac was not convinced. Something felt wrong. The voice did not sound like Esau's. Genesis 27:21-23 describes what happened. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, as his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. The touch convinced Isaac where the voice had failed. He felt the hairy skin on Jacob's hands and neck. He smelled the outdoor scent on the clothes. Isaac asked one more time in Genesis 27:24, Art thou my very son Esau? And Jacob answered, I am. Isaac then said in Genesis 27:25, Bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. Jacob brought the food close, and Isaac ate. He also brought wine, and Isaac drank. Then, as Genesis 27:26-27 records, Isaac said to him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and blessed him. The blessing flowed from Isaac's lips. Genesis 27:27-29 preserves these powerful words. See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be everyone that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. It was done. The blessing had been spoken, and in that culture it could not be taken back. Jacob had stolen his brother's birthright through deception. Jacob left his father's tent just in time. Genesis 27:30 tells us, And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. Esau had no idea what had just happened. He had successfully hunted game, prepared the savory meat his father loved, and now carried it eagerly to receive his blessing. Genesis 27:31-32 shows us Esau's confidence. And he also had made savory meat, and brought it unto his father, and said unto his father, Let my father arise, and eat of his son's venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac his father said unto him, Who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau. Isaac's body went cold. Genesis 27:33 describes his reaction. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly, and said, Who? Where is he that hath taken venison and brought it me? And I have eaten of all before thou camest, and have blessed him. Yea, and he shall be blessed. The old man shook violently. He realized he had been tricked, but the blessing had been given. It was sealed. Esau understood immediately what had happened. Genesis 27:34 captures his anguish. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto his father, Bless me, even me also, O my father. This was not just disappointment. This was the sound of a man's future being torn away from him. Everything he had expected, everything he had been promised as the firstborn, was gone. Esau begged for an explanation. Genesis 27:35-36 records the painful conversation. And he said, Thy brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, Is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright. And behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. The name Jacob meant heel-grabber or deceiver, and Esau now felt the full weight of that meaning. This was the 2nd time Jacob had taken something precious from him. Esau pleaded desperately. Genesis 27:36-38 continues, "And he said, Hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? And Isaac answered and said unto Esau, Behold, I have made him thy lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants. And with corn and wine have I sustained him. And what shall I do now unto thee, my son? And Esau said unto his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. A grown man, a hunter, a warrior, stood weeping before his father. Isaac did give Esau a blessing, but it was nothing like what Jacob had received. Genesis 27:39-40 records Isaac's words to Esau, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Esau would live by the sword and serve his brother. The pain turned to rage. Genesis 27:41 reveals what grew in Esau's heart. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. He would wait until Isaac died, observe the proper mourning period, and then he would kill Jacob. The family was shattered. Word traveled fast in a family tent. Rebekah heard about Esau's murderous plans, and she knew her son Jacob was in immediate danger. Genesis 27:42-45 shows us her urgent warning. And these words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah, and she sent and called Jacob her younger son, and said unto him, Behold, thy brother Esau, as touching thee, doth comfort himself, purposing to kill thee. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise, flee thou to Laban my brother to Haran, and tarry with him a few days, until thy brother's fury turn away, until thy brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forget that which thou hast done to him. Then I will send and fetch thee from thence. Why should I be deprived also of you both in one day? Rebekah thought this would be temporary, just a few days until Esau's anger cooled. She had no idea she would never see Jacob again. But she needed a reason to send Jacob away that Isaac would accept. She could not tell him about Esau's death threat directly, so she used a different approach. Genesis 27:46 records what Rebekah said to Isaac. And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do me? She complained about the local Canaanite women, the same kind Esau had married, and how miserable they made her life. This gave Isaac a respectable reason to send Jacob away. It worked. Genesis 28:1-2 tells us Isaac's response. And Isaac called Jacob, and blessed him, and charged him, and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padanaram, to the house of Bethuel thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. Isaac blessed Jacob again, and sent him to Mesopotamia, to Rebekah's family, to find a wife there. Genesis 28:3-4 records Isaac's blessing, and God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee, and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. Even though Jacob had obtained the earlier blessing through deception, Isaac now confirmed it openly and added the blessing of Abraham to it. Genesis 28:5 shows us Jacob's departure. And Isaac sent away Jacob, and he went to Padanaram unto Laban, son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. Jacob left everything behind: his home, his family, his father's wealth, all the comfort and security he had known. He walked alone into unknown territory, heading northeast toward Haran, a journey of about 500 miles on foot. He was running for his life, but he was also walking into God's plan. Jacob traveled north through the hill country. The days were long, and the nights brought the cold desert air. He had no tent, no servants, no caravan, just himself, whatever supplies he could carry, and the weight of everything that had happened. Genesis 28:10-11 describes his first night away from home. And Jacob went out from Beersheba, and went toward Haran, and he lighted upon a certain place, and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place, and put them for his pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep. The sun had set, and Jacob needed to stop. He was in the middle of nowhere, just rocks and open ground. He took one of the stones and used it as a pillow. This was not comfortable. This was survival. The man who had lived in tents, who had stayed close to home while his brother roamed the fields, was now completely alone in the wilderness. No mother to protect him, no father to bless him. Just the hard ground, a stone for his head, and the vast darkness above. But this uncomfortable, lonely place was exactly where God chose to meet him. Sometimes God speaks loudest when everything else is stripped away. Jacob closed his eyes on that stone pillow, exhausted from travel and weighed down by the chaos he had left behind. He had no idea that this night would mark him forever. The place seemed ordinary, even desolate. But Jacob was about to discover that God can show up anywhere. As he drifted into sleep, heaven was preparing to open. In his sleep, Jacob began to dream. But this was not an ordinary dream. Genesis 28:12 tells us exactly what he saw. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Right there, in that empty place, Jacob saw a stairway. It stood firmly on the ground where he lay, but it stretched upward into the sky until it reached heaven itself. Angels were moving on this ladder. They were going up and coming down, as if this place was a gateway between earth and heaven. Jacob was seeing something humans are not supposed to see, the connection between the natural and supernatural worlds. This was God pulling back the curtain to show Jacob that heaven and earth are not as far apart as we think, but the dream was not finished. Genesis 28:13 continues, And, behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I'm the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. At the top of the ladder stood the Lord himself. Not an angel, not a messenger. God Almighty was speaking directly to Jacob. God identified himself by connecting to Jacob's family line. He was the God of Abraham, Jacob's grandfather, and the God of Isaac, Jacob's father. This was personal. This was the same God who had made promises to Abraham decades earlier. And now he was speaking those promises to Jacob, the deceiver, the one running away from the consequences of his lies. God told Jacob that the very ground he was sleeping on would belong to him and his descendants. This was not just comfort. This was destiny being spoken over a man who had nothing at that moment except a rock for a pillow. God continued speaking, and his words expanded beyond just the land. Genesis 28:14 records the promise, And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south, and in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Jacob's descendants would be countless, like dust that covers the earth. They would spread in every direction, and through Jacob's family line, every nation on earth would be blessed. This was the same promise God had given to Abraham. Now it was being passed directly to Jacob, not because Jacob deserved it, not because he had earned it through good behavior, but because God had chosen him, and God's choices are not based on human merit. Then God gave Jacob something he desperately needed in that moment: personal assurance. Genesis 28:15 shows us God's intimate promise. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee, until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. God promised to be with Jacob everywhere he went. God would protect him. God would bring him back home. And God would not abandon him until every promise was fulfilled. Think about what Jacob needed to hear right then. He was alone, afraid, running from a brother who wanted him dead. He had just deceived his father and torn his family apart. He had no idea what waited for him in Haran, or if he would ever see his home again. And into that fear and uncertainty, God spoke peace. I am with you. I will keep you. I will bring you back. I will not leave you. This was not a blessing Jacob earned. This was grace meeting him in the wilderness. God was establishing a covenant with a man who had proven himself to be a liar and a cheat. That is the mystery of how God works. He chooses broken people and makes them into something they could never be on their own. Jacob woke up suddenly. Genesis 28:16 captures his first reaction. And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place. And I knew it not." Fear and wonder filled him. God had been right there, and Jacob had not known it when he lay down to sleep. He had thought this was just an empty spot in the wilderness, a random place to rest. But it was holy ground. Genesis 28:17 shows us how deeply this affected him. And he was afraid and said, "How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." The word dreadful here means full of awe, the kind of fear that comes when you realize you are standing in the presence of something infinitely greater than yourself. Jacob understood that this place was a doorway between earth and heaven. He knew he needed to mark this moment. Genesis 28:18 tells us what Jacob did next. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. He took the stone he had slept on and stood it upright as a memorial. Then he poured oil on it, setting it apart as sacred, as a witness to what God had done there. Genesis 28:19 records what Jacob named the place. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. The town was originally called Luz, but Jacob renamed it Bethel, which means house of God. From that day forward, this place would be remembered not for what it looked like, but for what happened there. Then Jacob made a vow. Genesis 28:20-22 preserves his words. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God, and this stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee." Jacob promised that if God would protect him, provide for him, and bring him home safely, then the Lord would be his God. He would make that stone pillar into a place of worship, and he would give back to God a 10th of everything he received. This vow was Jacob's response to God's promise. God had already committed to Jacob unconditionally, but Jacob was now choosing to commit himself back to God. He got up from that place, picked up his journey, and continued toward Haran, but he was different now. He had met God face to face, and nothing would ever be the same. Jacob continued his journey toward Haran, walking through unfamiliar lands with nothing but the promises God had spoken to him at Bethel. After many days of travel, Genesis 29:1 tells us, "Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east." He had finally reached the territory where his mother's family lived. As he traveled, Jacob came across an open field, and there in the distance he saw something important. Genesis 29:2-3 describes what he found. "And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered. And they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place." This was a community well where shepherds brought their flocks to drink. A large stone covered the opening, and it took several people working together to move it. Jacob walked up to the shepherds resting by the well with their sheep. He wanted information. Genesis 29:4-5 shows us their conversation. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. Jacob's heart must have jumped. These shepherds knew his uncle Laban. He was in the right place. Jacob asked them another question in Genesis 29:6. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. Laban was alive and well, and even better, his daughter Rachel was coming right now with her father's flock. The timing was perfect. Genesis 29:7-8 shows us what happened next. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day. Neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. Jacob suggested they water their sheep and move on, since there was still plenty of daylight left for grazing. But the shepherds explained their custom. They had to wait until all the flocks arrived, then everyone would work together to roll away the heavy stone. While they were still talking, someone appeared. Genesis 29:9 records the moment. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. There she was, Rachel, Laban's daughter, approaching with her father's flock. Jacob's cousin, his kinswoman, the woman who would change everything. The moment Jacob saw Rachel, something powerful happened inside him. Genesis 29:10 tells us his immediate reaction. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Jacob did not wait for the other shepherds. He did not follow their custom of waiting for everyone to arrive. He walked straight to that well, and by himself, he rolled away the massive stone that normally required multiple men to move. This was not just helpfulness. This was a man showing his strength, his capability, his desire to serve this woman he had just seen. Adrenaline and emotion gave him supernatural strength in that moment. He watered all of Laban's sheep right there in front of Rachel. Then something even more intense happened. Genesis 29:11 describes it. And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. Jacob kissed her. This was a family greeting, a kiss of kinship, but it was also loaded with emotion. And then Jacob, this grown man who had traveled hundreds of miles alone, who had wrestled with deception and fear, broke down and cried out loud. All the loneliness, all the relief of finding family, all the overwhelming feeling of meeting this beautiful woman, it poured out of him in tears. Genesis 29:12 shows us what Jacob told her. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. Jacob explained who he was, the son of Rebekah, which made him Laban's nephew. Rachel immediately understood the significance. She left her sheep and ran home to tell her father that his sister's son had arrived. News traveled fast. Genesis 29:13 records Laban's response. And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. Laban ran out to meet Jacob, hugged him, kissed him, and brought him into his home. Jacob recounted everything, his journey, his family, why he had come. Laban welcomed him as family. Genesis 29:14 confirms their relationship. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. Laban acknowledged Jacob as his own blood relative. Jacob stayed with Laban's household, settling into the rhythm of their daily life. But during that whole month, Jacob could not stop thinking about Rachel. After a month of living with Laban's family and working alongside them, Laban approached Jacob with a proposal. Genesis 29:15 shows us what Laban said. And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? Laban did not want Jacob working for free just because they were relatives. He wanted to know what payment Jacob desired. Jacob knew exactly what he wanted. Genesis 29 to 16:18 tells us about Laban's daughters and Jacob's answer. And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. Laban had 2 daughters. The older one was Leah, and the Bible mentions she had tender eyes. But Rachel, the younger one, was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob had fallen completely in love with Rachel, and he made an incredible offer. He would work 7 years for the right to marry her. 7 years was an enormous bride price, far more than was customary. But Jacob did not care. He wanted Rachel, and he was willing to work for her. Genesis 29:19 shows us Laban's response. And Laban said, It's better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. Laban agreed to the deal. He said it was better to give Rachel to Jacob than to some other man. Jacob would stay and work, and at the end of 7 years, Rachel would be his wife. So Jacob began his years of labor. Genesis 29:20 describes those 7 years with one beautiful sentence. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. 7 years of hard work, 7 years of waiting, 7 years of serving Laban. But because of how much Jacob loved Rachel, those years felt like just a few days. Time flew by when he thought about her. Every day of work brought him one day closer to making her his wife. Finally, the 7 years were completed. Genesis 29:21 shows us Jacob's request. And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. Jacob had fulfilled his part of the agreement. He had worked faithfully for 7 years. Now he wanted what had been promised to him, his wife Rachel. Laban agreed to hold the wedding. Genesis 29:22 tells us what he did. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Laban organized a huge celebration, inviting everyone from the area. There was food, drink, music, and dancing. This was the moment Jacob had been waiting for through 7 long years of labor. The feast continued into the evening. In that culture, wedding celebrations were elaborate, and the bride remained veiled throughout the ceremony and festivities. As night fell, the moment came for the marriage to be completed. Genesis 29:23 records what happened. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him. And he went in unto her. In the darkness of the wedding tent, Laban brought his daughter to Jacob, but it was not Rachel. It was Leah, the older sister. Jacob consummated the marriage without realizing he had been given the wrong woman. Genesis 29:24 adds a detail. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid. Laban even gave Leah a servant as part of her marriage, making everything seem official and proper. Morning came. Genesis 29:25 captures one of the most shocking moments in Jacob's life. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? When the sun rose, and Jacob could finally see clearly, he discovered the woman lying beside him was Leah, not Rachel. The deception was complete. Jacob was furious. He confronted Laban immediately. What have you done to me? He demanded. Did I not work for you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me? The word beguiled means to trick or deceive. Jacob, the man who had once deceived his own father, was now on the receiving end of deception. He knew exactly how betrayal felt. Laban had his answer ready. Genesis 29:26 shows us his justification. And Laban said, It must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Laban claimed it was against their custom to marry off the younger daughter before the older one. This was a cultural rule Jacob had not known about. Laban had used Jacob's ignorance against him, but Laban was not finished. Genesis 29:27 records his proposal, "Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet." 7 other years. Laban told Jacob to complete the bridal week with Leah, the traditional 7 days of celebration following a wedding. After that week was finished, Laban would give him Rachel as well. But there was a price. Jacob would have to work another 7 years. Jacob was trapped. He'd already consummated the marriage with Leah. In that culture, that made her his wife permanently. He could not undo what had happened. If he wanted Rachel, the woman he had loved and worked for, he would have to agree to Laban's terms. Genesis 29:28 tells us what Jacob decided. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. Jacob completed the week of celebration with Leah. Then, after just 7 days, Laban gave him Rachel as his second wife. Genesis 29:29 adds, "And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid." Rachel also received a servant, a young woman named Bilhah. Then Genesis 29:30 describes what happened next. "And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Jacob married Rachel, and loved her more than Leah. Everyone knew it. Leah knew it. Rachel knew it. Laban knew it. And Jacob committed himself to another 7 years of work to pay for the woman he truly wanted. Jacob had wanted to escape the consequences of his own deception back home. Now he was living under the deception of someone else, working 14 years total for a wife, trapped in a marriage he had not chosen, and bound to a father-in-law who had manipulated him. But he stayed because of love. Jacob had 2 wives, but his heart belonged to only one of them. This created a painful situation in his household. Genesis 29:31 shows us how God responded. "And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, even hated, and he had compassion on her." God gave Leah the ability to have children, but Rachel remained barren. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to her first son. Genesis 29:32 records the moment. "And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. She named him Reuben, which means, see a son. Leah believed that giving Jacob a son would make him love her. She was crying out for affection through childbearing, but it did not change Jacob's heart. Leah became pregnant again. Genesis 29:33 tells us, And she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. She named her second son Simeon, which means heard, because the Lord had heard that she was unloved, and gave her another son. Leah conceived a third time. Genesis 29:34 describes her hope, and she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. She named this son Levi, meaning attached or joined, believing that surely now, after giving Jacob 3 sons, he would finally become attached to her emotionally. Then Leah had a 4th son. Something shifted in her heart. Genesis 29:35 shows us her change in perspective. And she conceived again, and bare a son. And she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. She named him Judah, which means praise. For the first time, Leah was not focused on winning Jacob's love. She was praising God. Then, after Judah, she stopped having children for a time. Meanwhile, Rachel remained childless. She watched her sister give Jacob 4 sons, while her own womb stayed empty. The pain was unbearable. Genesis 31 captures Rachel's desperation, and when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. Rachel was so desperate for children that she felt like she would die without them. She begged Jacob to give her children. Jacob's anger flared at her. Genesis 32 records his response, and Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? Jacob shot back at her, asking if he was God. He could not control who had children and who did not. That was in God's hands, not his. The household was filled with tension. Two sisters, one loved but barren, one unloved but fruitful. Both were in pain, and both were locked in an unspoken competition for their husband's love and attention. Rachel came up with a plan. In that culture, if a wife could not have children, she could give her servant to her husband, and any children born through that servant would legally belong to the wife. Genesis 33:4 shows us Rachel's decision, and she said, Behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, hoping to have children through her. The plan worked. Genesis 35:6 tells us, And Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. Bilhah gave birth to a son, and Rachel named him Dan, meaning judged, because she felt God had judged in her favor and heard her cry. Bilhah conceived again. Genesis 37:8 records, And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, With great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. Rachel named the second son Naphtali, meaning my wrestling, because she felt she had been in an intense struggle with her sister and had finally won. Leah saw what was happening. She had stopped having children, and now Rachel was gaining ground through her servant. Leah was not going to let Rachel get ahead. Genesis 39 tells us Leah's response. When Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah her maid, and gave her Jacob to wife. Leah took her own servant Zilpah, and gave her to Jacob as another wife. Zilpah quickly became pregnant. Genesis 30:10-11 records, And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, A troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. Leah named him Gad, meaning good fortune, celebrating this new addition to her count. Zilpah had another son. Genesis 30:12-13 tells us, And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed, and she called his name Asher. Leah named this son Asher, meaning happy or blessed, because she believed other women would. Now call her blessed. Jacob now had 4 wives, 2 full wives and 2 concubines, and the competition between the sisters had pulled everyone into the chaos. The household was growing, but so was the tension. Years passed. Leah continued to have more children, eventually bearing Jacob 2 more sons and a daughter. But Rachel remained barren despite all her prayers and tears. She watched everyone around her have baby after baby while she had none of her own. Then something changed. Genesis 30:22 marks a turning point. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb. God remembered Rachel. He heard her prayers, and finally he opened her womb. This was not luck or chance. This was God responding to her years of heartbreak and longing. Genesis 30:23-24 describes what happened. And she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, The Lord shall add to me another son. Rachel gave birth to a son. She named him Joseph, which means, may he add, expressing 2 meanings at once. First, God had taken away her shame and reproach. In that culture, barrenness was seen as a disgrace. Second, she was already hoping for more, praying that the Lord would add yet another son to her. Joseph's birth was not just another child being born into Jacob's large family. This was the son of the woman Jacob loved most, born after years of waiting and pain. Joseph came into a complicated family system where his half-brothers had different mothers, where jealousy and competition had shaped the household, and where he would immediately be set apart as special. Joseph grew up in a household filled with tension. He had 10 older brothers from different mothers, and everyone could see that their father Jacob loved Joseph differently than the rest. Genesis 37:3 explains why now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children. Because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other sons because Joseph was born to him when he was old, the firstborn son of Rachel, the wife he had always loved. And Jacob did not hide his favoritism. He made Joseph a special coat, a beautiful garment with long sleeves and many colors. This coat was not just clothing, it was a symbol. It was the kind of robe worn by royalty or by sons who would not do hard labor in the fields. It announced to everyone that Joseph was special, that he was set apart, that his father saw him as more important than his brothers. The brothers noticed. How could they not? Every time Joseph wore that coat, it was a reminder that their father loved him more. Genesis 37:4 shows us their reaction, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. They hated Joseph. The hatred was so deep that they could not even have a normal conversation with him. They could not speak kindly to him or be at peace with him. Joseph was probably 17 years old at this time. According to Genesis 37:2, he was young, perhaps unaware of how deeply his brothers resented him. Or maybe he knew, but did not understand, the danger brewing in their hearts. Either way, he continued to live as the favored son, wearing his special coat, enjoying his father's love, while his brothers burned with jealousy. One night, Joseph had a dream. It was vivid and strange, and when he woke up, he could not keep it to himself. Genesis 37:5-7 records what happened. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. Joseph told his brothers about his dream. In it, they were all out in the field, tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, Joseph's bundle stood up straight and tall, and all of his brothers' bundles gathered around his bundle and bowed down to it. The meaning was clear, and the brothers understood it immediately. This dream suggested that Joseph would rule over them, that they would one day bow down to him. Genesis 37:8 captures their fury, and his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. They were outraged. Are you really going to be our king? They demanded. Are you actually going to rule over us? Their hatred grew even stronger because of his dream, and because he had been foolish enough to tell them about it. Joseph should have kept quiet. He should have realized that sharing this dream would only make things worse. But he was young, and perhaps naive, not yet understanding that some truths are dangerous to speak aloud. Joseph had another dream, and once again he shared it. Genesis 37:9 tells us what he saw. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. This dream was even more dramatic than the first. Joseph saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars all bowing down to him. The symbolism was unmistakable. The sun and moon represented his father and mother, and the 11 stars represented his 11 brothers. This time, Joseph told the dream not just to his brothers, but also to his father. Genesis 37:10 shows us Jacob's response, and he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? Even Jacob was upset. He rebuked Joseph, asking him what kind of dream this was. Was Joseph suggesting that his father, his mother, and all his brothers would one day bow down to him? Genesis 37:11 reveals two different reactions. And his brethren envied him. But his father observed the saying. The brothers were filled with envy, consumed by jealousy at the idea that Joseph might rise above them. But Jacob, though he had rebuked Joseph publicly, kept the dream in his mind. He pondered it, wondering if perhaps there was something to these dreams after all. Joseph had now made himself a target. His special coat had already marked him as the favorite. His dreams had made him appear arrogant and ambitious. The combination was deadly. Time passed, and one day Jacob sent Joseph on an errand. His brothers had taken the flocks far from home to find pasture, and Jacob wanted to know how they were doing. Genesis 37:13-14 records the conversation. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, Here am I. And he said to him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Jacob told Joseph to go check on his brothers and the flocks and bring back a report. Joseph agreed and left from Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, his brothers were not there. Genesis 37:15-17 tells us what happened next. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, They are departed hence. For I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. Joseph was wandering around looking for them, when a man told him they had moved on to Dothan. So Joseph continued his journey until he found them. The brothers saw him coming from a distance. That colorful coat made him easy to spot. Genesis 37:18 reveals what went through their minds. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Before Joseph even reached them, they began plotting to kill him. The hatred that had been building for years suddenly erupted into murderous intent. Genesis 37:19-20 shows us their plan. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. So they mocked him, calling him this dreamer. Their plan was simple and cruel. Kill Joseph. Throw his body into a pit. Tell their father a wild animal had killed him. And see what happened to his dreams then. But one brother objected. Genesis 37:21-22 tells us about Reuben's intervention. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again. Reuben, the oldest brother, spoke up. He told them not to kill Joseph directly. Instead, they should throw him into a pit in the wilderness and not lay a hand on him. Reuben's secret plan was to come back later, pull Joseph out, and return him safely to their father. He was trying to save Joseph's life without directly opposing all the other brothers. Joseph finally reached his brothers, completely unaware of the danger he was in. Genesis 37:23 describes what they did to him. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. The moment Joseph arrived, they attacked him and tore off his special coat, the very symbol of their father's favoritism. They ripped it from his body violently. Then Genesis 37:24 tells us what happened next. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. They grabbed Joseph and threw him into a cistern, a deep hole dug into the ground used for collecting rainwater. This one was empty and dry. Joseph was trapped at the bottom, unable to climb out, probably calling up to his brothers, begging them to let him go. But they ignored him. Genesis 37:25 shows us what the brothers did while Joseph was in the pit. And they sat down to eat bread. And they lifted up their eyes and looked. And behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. They sat down to eat a meal, as if nothing was wrong, as if their brother was not trapped in a hole nearby. While they were eating, they looked up and saw a caravan approaching. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders coming from Gilead, their camels loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. They were traveling merchants heading south to Egypt to sell their goods. The sight of these traders gave one of the brothers an idea. Judah looked at the caravan and then at his brothers. Genesis 37:26-27 records his suggestion. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Judah pointed out that killing Joseph would not benefit them at all. Why not sell him to these traders instead? That way they would make some money, and they would not have his blood on their hands. After all, Judah reasoned, Joseph was still their brother, their own flesh and blood. The other brothers agreed to this plan. Genesis 37:28 tells us what happened. Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. They pulled Joseph up out of the pit. Imagine his relief, thinking perhaps they had changed their minds and were letting him go. But instead, they handed him over to the traders and received 20 pieces of silver in payment. The Ishmaelites took Joseph and added him to their caravan, heading south toward Egypt. Joseph was being taken away from everything he knew, sold like an animal, betrayed by his own brothers, but the brothers still needed to cover up what they had done. Genesis 37:31 shows us their plan. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in the blood. They took Joseph's beautiful coat of many colors, slaughtered a young goat, and soaked the coat in its blood. They made it look like Joseph had been attacked and killed by a wild animal. Genesis 37:32 describes what they did next. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, This have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. They brought the bloodied coat to Jacob, but did not tell him directly what had happened. Instead, they presented it to him and asked him to identify whether it was Joseph's coat or not. They were letting Jacob draw his own conclusion, letting him believe the lie without them having to speak it directly. Jacob looked at the coat and recognized it immediately. Genesis 37:33 captures his horrified response. And he knew it and said, It is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Jacob knew it was Joseph's coat. He concluded exactly what the brothers wanted him to believe, that a wild animal had attacked and killed his beloved son. Joseph had been torn to pieces. The grief hit Jacob like a crushing wave. Genesis 37:34 describes his reaction. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. Jacob tore his own clothes, a sign of extreme grief and mourning in that culture. He put on sackcloth, rough cloth worn during times of deep sorrow. And he mourned for Joseph day after day. His family tried to comfort him. Genesis 37:35 tells us, And all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. And he said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. All of Jacob's children, including the very sons who had sold Joseph, came to comfort their father. But Jacob refused their comfort. He said he would mourn for Joseph until the day he died, and went down to the grave himself. Jacob wept bitterly for his lost son. The brothers had to live with what they had done. They had to watch their father's heart break every single day, knowing they were responsible. They had to listen to him weep and refuse comfort, and they had to keep their terrible secret. Meanwhile, Genesis 37:36 gives us an update on Joseph. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and captain of the guard. The traders who bought Joseph took him all the way to Egypt and sold him there. His buyer was a man named Potiphar, who was an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard, a high-ranking official in Egypt. Joseph had gone from being the favored son in his father's house to being a slave in a foreign land. Joseph's life had been turned upside down. One day he was wearing a coat of many colors, the beloved son of a wealthy shepherd. The next day he was standing in an Egyptian slave market, being sold to strangers in a land where he did not speak the language, did not know the customs, and had no rights. He was utterly alone, but Joseph was not truly alone. Genesis 39:1-2 tells us something crucial. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. The Lord was with Joseph. Even in slavery, even in Egypt, even after everything that had happened, God had not abandoned him. And because the Lord was with Joseph, he prospered even in his master's house. Genesis 39:3 shows us what Potiphar noticed. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Potiphar could see there was something different about Joseph. Everything Joseph did succeeded. Everything he touched seemed to work out well. Potiphar recognized that Joseph's God was blessing him. Joseph gained Potiphar's trust. Genesis 39:4 tells us, And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. Joseph found favor with Potiphar. He served him well, and Potiphar promoted him, putting him in charge of his entire household. Joseph went from being a common slave to being the manager of everything Potiphar owned. The blessing continued to flow. Genesis 39:5 describes what happened. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. From the moment Potiphar put Joseph in charge, God blessed Potiphar's house because of Joseph. Everything in Potiphar's possession, both in his house and in his fields, prospered. Joseph's presence brought blessing to everyone around him. Potiphar trusted Joseph completely. Genesis 39:6 sums it up, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well-favored. Potiphar put everything he owned under Joseph's management, and did not worry about any of it. The only thing Potiphar concerned himself with was the food he ate. Everything else Joseph handled. The verse also notes that Joseph was handsome and good-looking. Joseph had been thrown into a pit by his brothers, sold as a slave, taken to a foreign country, and forced to serve in someone else's house. But through it all, God was with him. Joseph did not give up. He did not become bitter. He worked faithfully wherever he was, and God honored that faithfulness. Joseph had gone from the bottom of a pit to the top of an Egyptian household. His circumstances had changed, but one thing remained constant. The Lord was with him. Joseph's success in Potiphar's house did not go unnoticed by everyone in the household. Potiphar's wife began to look at Joseph with desire. Day after day, she watched this handsome young man managing her husband's affairs. Genesis 39:7 tells us what happened. And it came to pass, after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, "Lie with me." She made her intentions clear and direct. She wanted Joseph to sleep with her, but Joseph refused. Genesis 39:8-9 shows us his response. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, "Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Joseph explained his reasoning. Potiphar trusted him with everything. He had been given authority over the entire household. The only thing Potiphar had kept from Joseph was his own wife. How could Joseph betray that trust? And more importantly, how could he commit such a terrible sin against God? But Potiphar's wife did not give up. Genesis 39:10 tells us, "And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. She kept asking him, day after day, but Joseph refused every single time. He would not even spend time alone with her. Then one day, Genesis 39:11-12 describes what happened. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. Joseph came into the house to do his work, and none of the other servants were around. Potiphar's wife grabbed his cloak and demanded again that he sleep with her. Joseph's response was immediate. He pulled away so quickly that his cloak stayed in her hand, and he ran out of the house. The woman's desire turned to rage. She had been rejected and humiliated. Genesis 39:13-15 shows us her revenge. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice, and it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. She still had Joseph's cloak in her hands, and she used it as false evidence. She called the household servants and told them a lie, that Joseph had tried to assault her, that she had screamed, and that he had run away, leaving his cloak behind. When Potiphar came home, she told him the same story. Genesis 39:17-18 records her accusation, and she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me, and it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled out. She blamed her husband for bringing this Hebrew slave into their home, and claimed Joseph had tried to force himself on her. Genesis 39:19-20 tells us Potiphar's reaction. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Potiphar's anger burned, and he had Joseph thrown into prison, specifically the prison where the king's prisoners were kept. Joseph had done nothing wrong. He had honored God, refused temptation, and maintained his integrity. And his reward was prison, but even in prison something remained constant. Genesis 39:21-23 tells us, But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. The Lord was still with Joseph. God showed him mercy and gave him favor, even with the prison warden. The warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners, and the warden did not even need to supervise anything Joseph managed, because the Lord was with Joseph and made everything he did succeed. Time passed, and Joseph adjusted to life in prison. Then something significant happened. Genesis 41:3 tells us, And it came to pass after these things, that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers, and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. Two of Pharaoh's officials, his cupbearer and his baker, did something that offended the king. Pharaoh became angry with them and had them thrown into the same prison where Joseph was being held. Genesis 44 continues, "And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. The captain of the guard assigned Joseph to take care of these two men, and they remained in prison for some time. One night both men had dreams." Genesis 45-8 describes what happened, "And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. Both officials had troubling dreams on the same night, and the next morning Joseph could see they were upset. When he asked why, they explained they had both dreamed, but had no one to interpret their dreams. Joseph told them that interpretations belonged to God, and asked them to share their dreams with him. The cupbearer went first. Genesis 49:11 records his dream. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. In his dream, the cupbearer saw a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. He squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and handed the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph gave him the interpretation. Genesis 40:12-13 tells us, And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head, and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. The 3 branches represented 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh would restore the cupbearer to his former position, and he would serve Pharaoh's cup again, just as he used to. This was good news for the cupbearer, and Joseph saw an opportunity. Genesis 40:14-15 shows us Joseph's request. But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed, I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. And here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him when he was restored to Pharaoh's service. He asked him to show kindness by mentioning Joseph to Pharaoh and helping get him out of prison. Joseph explained that he had been kidnapped from his homeland, and that he had done nothing in Egypt to deserve being thrown into prison. When the baker heard that the cupbearer's interpretation was positive, he wanted his dream interpreted too. Genesis 40:16-17 records what the baker said. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of bake meats for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. In his dream, the baker was carrying 3 white baskets on his head, filled with baked goods for Pharaoh. But birds were eating the food from the top basket. Joseph's interpretation was grim. Genesis 40:18-19 tells us, And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days, yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. The 3 baskets also represented 3 days, but the outcome was terrible. Within 3 days, Pharaoh would execute the baker by hanging, and birds would eat his flesh. 3 days later, it was Pharaoh's birthday. Genesis 40:20-22 describes what happened. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again. And he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, but he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Everything happened exactly as Joseph had said. Pharaoh restored the cupbearer to his position, and the cupbearer once again served Pharaoh's cup. But Pharaoh had the baker executed by hanging. Joseph's interpretations had been perfectly accurate, but there was a problem. Genesis 40:23 tells us, "Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgat him." The cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot all about the man who had interpreted his dream and asked for help. Joseph remained in prison forgotten for 2 more full years. 2 years passed. Joseph continued serving in prison, faithful but forgotten. Then Pharaoh himself had a dream. Genesis 41:1-4 describes it. "And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. Pharaoh dreamed he was standing by the Nile River. 7 healthy fat cows came up out of the river and grazed in the meadow. Then 7 ugly thin cows came up and stood beside them. The thin cows ate the fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream." Genesis 41:5-7 records it. "And he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. This time Pharaoh saw 7 full, healthy heads of grain growing on a single stalk. Then 7 thin heads of grain, scorched by the east wind, sprouted after them. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the full heads. Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. Morning came, and Pharaoh was deeply troubled." Genesis 41:8 tells us, "And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Pharaoh called for all the magicians and wise men in Egypt. He told them his dreams, but not one of them could tell him what the dreams meant. Then the cupbearer finally remembered. Genesis 41:9-13 shows us what he said. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker, and we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. The cupbearer confessed that he remembered his faults, and told Pharaoh about Joseph. He explained how he and the baker had both dreamed in prison, and a young Hebrew slave had interpreted their dreams accurately. The cupbearer was restored, and the baker was executed, exactly as Joseph had said. Genesis 41:14 describes what happened next. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself, and changed his raiment, and came in unto Pharaoh. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. They rushed him out of the prison. He shaved, changed his clothes to make himself presentable, and was brought before Pharaoh. Joseph stood before the most powerful man in Egypt. Genesis 41:15-16 records their first exchange. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee, that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me, God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Pharaoh told Joseph he had heard that Joseph could interpret dreams. Joseph's response was humble and direct. He could not do it himself, but God would give Pharaoh the answer he needed. Pharaoh then described both dreams to Joseph in detail, telling him about the 7 fat and 7 thin cows, and the 7 full and 7 thin heads of grain. And noting that he had told the magicians, but none could explain it, Joseph gave Pharaoh the interpretation. Genesis 41:25-27 records his words. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. Both dreams had the same meaning. God was showing Pharaoh what was about to happen. The 7 good cows and 7 good heads of grain represented 7 years of great abundance. The 7 thin cows and 7 thin heads of grain represented 7 years of famine that would follow. Joseph continued explaining. Genesis 41:28-32 tells us, This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It's because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Joseph explained that 7 years of abundance were coming to all of Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine. The famine would be so bad that people would forget the years of plenty. The reason Pharaoh had the dream twice was because the matter was firmly decided by God, and God would make it happen soon. Then Joseph did something remarkable. He did not just interpret the dream, he gave advice. Genesis 41:33-36 shows us Joseph's counsel. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Joseph advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise man to oversee Egypt. During the 7 good years, this person should collect 1/5 of all the crops and store the grain in the cities. That stored food would save Egypt during the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh and his officials were impressed. Genesis 41:37-39 records their response, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Pharaoh recognized that God's Spirit was in Joseph. Since God had revealed all this to Joseph, Pharaoh concluded that no one was wiser than Joseph himself. Then Pharaoh made an astounding decision. Genesis 41:40-44 tells us, Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the 2nd chariot which he had. And they cried before him, Bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh appointed Joseph to be in charge of his palace and all of Egypt. Only Pharaoh himself would be greater than Joseph. Pharaoh gave Joseph his signet ring, dressed him in fine linen robes, put a gold chain around his neck, and had him ride in the second royal chariot. People bowed before Joseph as he passed. He had become the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. Genesis 41:46 tells us Joseph's age. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old. He had been 17 when his brothers sold him into slavery. 13 years had passed. Years of slavery, false accusation, imprisonment, and waiting. But now, in a single day, God had lifted him from the prison to the palace. The 7 years of abundance came just as Joseph had predicted. Genesis 41:47-49 tells us, And in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, organizing the storage of grain. He stored up so much grain that they stopped measuring it because it was beyond counting. Then the 7 years of famine began. Genesis 41:54-57 describes what happened. And the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said, and the dearth was in all lands. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith to you do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses, and sold unto the Egyptians. And the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. The famine spread everywhere, but Egypt had bread because of Joseph's planning. Pharaoh directed everyone to Joseph, and people from all countries came to Egypt to buy grain. The famine reached Canaan, where Jacob and his family lived. Genesis 42:1-2 shows us what Jacob said to his sons. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do ye look one upon another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt and told his sons to go buy food so the family would not starve. Genesis 42:3-4 tells us what happened. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. 10 of Joseph's brothers went to Egypt to buy grain. But Jacob kept Benjamin at home, because he was afraid something bad might happen to him. Benjamin was Joseph's only full brother, born to Rachel, and after losing Joseph, Jacob could not bear to risk Benjamin. The brothers arrived in Egypt and came before Joseph. Genesis 42:6 describes the moment, and Joseph was the governor over the land. And he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came, and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph was in charge of selling grain to everyone. His brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. The dream Joseph had as a young man, the dream where his brother's sheaves bowed to his sheaf, was now coming true. Genesis 42:7-8 tells us what Joseph saw. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. Joseph recognized his brothers immediately, but they did not recognize him. How could they? The last time they saw him, He was 17 years old, wearing a colorful coat, speaking Hebrew, and crying as they sold him to traders. Now he was 39 years old, dressed in Egyptian royal robes, speaking Egyptian through an interpreter, and holding absolute power over them. They had no idea they were standing before their own brother. Joseph decided to test his brothers. He wanted to know if they had changed, if they felt any remorse for what they had done. Genesis 42:9 shows us what Joseph said. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies. To see the nakedness of the land ye are come. Joseph accused them of being spies who had come to find Egypt's weak points. The brothers were terrified. Genesis 42:10-13 records their defense. And they said unto him, Nay, my lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are all one man's sons. We are true men, thy servants are no spies. And he said unto them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, Thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. They insisted they were honest men, all sons of one father, who had only come to buy food. They explained they were 12 brothers total. The youngest was still home with their father, and one brother was no longer alive. They were referring to Joseph when they said, One is not, assuming he was dead. Joseph pressed them harder. Genesis 42:14-17 shows us his plan. And Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. By the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh surely ye are spies. And he put them all together into ward 3 days. Joseph told them they would have to prove their story by bringing their youngest brother to Egypt. He would keep them all in prison while one went back to get Benjamin. Then Joseph threw all of them into prison for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph changed his terms slightly. Genesis 42:18-20 records what he said. And Joseph said unto them the 3rd day, This do and live. For I fear God. If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses, but bring your youngest brother unto me. So shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. Joseph told them that because he feared God, he would let most of them go. One brother would stay as a hostage, while the others took grain home. But they must bring their youngest brother back to prove they were telling the truth. The brothers began talking among themselves in Hebrew, not realizing Joseph could understand them. Genesis 42:21-22 shows us their conversation. And they said one to another, We are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child? And ye would not hear. Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. The brothers admitted their guilt about Joseph. They remembered how he had begged them for mercy, and they had ignored him. Reuben reminded them that he had warned them not to harm Joseph, but they had not listened. Genesis 42:24 tells us Joseph's reaction. And he turned himself about from them, and wept, and returned to them again, and communed with them, and took from them Simeon, and bound him before their eyes. Joseph had to turn away, because he began to cry. He composed himself, turned back, and chose Simeon to be the one who would stay behind. Joseph had Simeon bound right in front of the brothers. Then Joseph did something they did not expect. Genesis 42:25 describes it. Then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn, and to restore every man's money into his sack, and to give them provision for the way. And thus did he unto them. Joseph ordered his servants to fill their bags with grain, but also to secretly put each brother's money back into his sack. He gave them food for their journey home. The brothers loaded their donkeys and left. Genesis 42:27-28 tells us what one of them discovered. And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, he espied his money. For behold, it was in his sack's mouth. And he said unto his brethren, My money is restored. And lo, it is even in my sack. And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, What is this that God hath done unto us? When one brother opened his sack to feed his donkey at their resting place, he found his money. They were all frightened, wondering what God was doing to them. They arrived home and told Jacob everything. Genesis 42:35-36 continues, And it came to pass as they emptied their sacks that, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not. And ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. As they emptied all their sacks, every single brother found his money returned. Both the brothers and Jacob were terrified. Jacob cried out that they had taken his children from him. Joseph was gone. Now Simeon was gone, and they wanted to take Benjamin. Everything seemed to be against him. Genesis 42:38 shows us Jacob's decision, and he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If mischief befall him by the way in the which ye go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Jacob said Benjamin would not go. Joseph was dead, and Benjamin was the only son of Rachel he had left. If anything happened to Benjamin, Jacob would die of grief. Time passed, and the family ate the grain they had brought from Egypt. When it was gone, the famine still raged. Genesis 43:1-2 tells us, And the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again, buy us a little food. Jacob told his sons to go back to Egypt to buy more food, but Judah reminded him of the Egyptian governor's demand. Genesis 43:3-5 records what Judah said. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, Ye shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. They could not return without Benjamin. The governor had made it absolutely clear. After much convincing, Jacob finally agreed. Genesis 43:11-14 shows us what Jacob said. And their father Israel said unto them, If it must be so now, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man a present, a little balm, and a little honey, spices and myrrh, nuts and almonds, and take double money in your hand. And the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it again in your hand. Peradventure it was an oversight. Take also your brother, and arise, go again unto the man, and God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother and Benjamin. If I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. Jacob told them to take gifts, double the money, and Benjamin. He prayed that God would give them mercy before the Egyptian governor. Whatever would happen, would happen. The brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin. When Joseph saw Benjamin, he told his steward to prepare a feast. Genesis 43:16 tells us, And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, Bring these men home, and slay, and make ready, for these men shall dine with me at noon. Joseph ordered a meal prepared, because the brothers would eat with him. When Joseph came home, the brothers gave him their gifts and bowed before him. Genesis 43:26-28 describes the scene. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to him to the earth. And he asked them of their welfare, and said, Is your father well, the old man of whom ye spake? Is he yet alive? And they answered, Thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive. And they bowed down their heads and made obeisance. Joseph asked about their father, and they told him Jacob was still alive and well. They bowed again. Then Joseph saw Benjamin, Genesis 43:29-30 captures the moment. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother, of whom ye spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. Joseph looked at Benjamin, his only full brother, and his emotions overwhelmed him. He quickly left the room and went to his private chamber, where he wept. After composing himself, Joseph returned, and the meal was served. Genesis 43:33-34 tells us, And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent messes unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. Joseph seated them in perfect order, from oldest to youngest, which amazed them. He sent them food from his table, but Benjamin received 5 times more than anyone else. The next morning, Joseph put his plan into action. Genesis 44:1-2 describes it. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money. And he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. Joseph had their sacks filled with grain, and their money returned again. But in Benjamin's sack he had his own silver cup hidden. The brothers left early in the morning. Genesis 44:3-4 continues, As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, they and their asses. And when they were gone out of the city, and not yet far off, Joseph said unto his steward, Up, follow after the men. And when thou dost overtake them, say unto them, Wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? As soon as they left the city, Joseph sent his steward after them with an accusation. The steward searched their sacks, starting with the oldest. Genesis 44:11-12 describes it. Then they speedily took down every man his sack to the ground, and opened every man his sack. And he searched, and began at the eldest, and left at the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Genesis 44:13 tells us, Then they rent their clothes, and laded every man his ass, and returned to the city. They tore their clothes in grief, and returned to the city. The brothers came back and fell before Joseph. Genesis 44:14-16 records the scene. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said unto them, What deed is this that ye have done? Wot ye not that such a man as I can certainly divine? And Judah said, What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found. They threw themselves down before him. Judah admitted they had no defense. God had uncovered their guilt. They would all become Joseph's slaves, including Benjamin, but Joseph refused. Genesis 44:17 tells us, And he said, God forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. Joseph said only Benjamin would stay as his slave. The rest could go home. This was the moment of truth. Years ago, the brothers had sold Joseph into slavery without a second thought. Now would they abandon Benjamin the same way? Judah stepped forward. Genesis 44:18-34 contains his long emotional speech. He explained how their father loved Benjamin, how Benjamin was the only son left from his beloved wife, how their father had lost one son already and would die if he lost Benjamin. Judah reminded Joseph that he had personally guaranteed Benjamin's safety to their father. Then Judah made an incredible offer. Genesis 44:33-34 records his words, Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad a bondman to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me? lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come on my father. Judah offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. He could not return to his father without Benjamin. He could not watch his father die of grief. The brothers had changed. They were willing to sacrifice themselves for Benjamin, the favored son. Joseph could not hold back any longer. Genesis 45:1-3 describes what happened. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. And he cried, "Cause every man to go out from me." And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. Joseph ordered everyone out except his brothers. Then he wept so loudly that everyone in Pharaoh's house heard him. He told his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? The brothers were terrified and could not answer. Genesis 45:4-8 continues, And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years, in the which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you, to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Joseph told them not to be angry with themselves, because God had sent him to Egypt ahead of them to save lives. It was not really the brothers who sent him, it was God. Joseph told them to hurry back to their father. Genesis 45:9-13 records his message, telling them to bring Jacob to Egypt, where the family would live in Goshen, and Joseph would provide for them during the remaining 5 years of famine. Genesis 45:14-15 describes the reconciliation. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brethren and wept upon them, and after that his brethren talked with him. Joseph hugged Benjamin and cried. Benjamin cried too. Then Joseph kissed all his brothers and wept with them. The brothers returned to Canaan with wagons full of supplies. Genesis 45:25-28 shows us Jacob's reaction. And they went up out of Egypt, and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father, and told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. And they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said unto them. And when he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived, and Israel said, It is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. At first Jacob did not believe them. But when he saw the wagons, his spirit came alive again. He would go see his son before he died. Jacob took his entire family to Egypt. Genesis 46:28-30 describes the reunion. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph, to direct his face unto Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot, and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him. And he fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. Joseph prepared his chariot and went to meet his father. When they saw each other, Joseph fell on Jacob's neck and wept for a long time. Jacob said he could now die in peace, because he had seen Joseph's face. Genesis 46:27 tells us, And the sons of Joseph, which were born him in Egypt, were 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Jacob, which came into Egypt, were 70. 70 people from Jacob's family came to Egypt. The family that had been torn apart by jealousy and betrayal was now together again. The son who had been sold as a slave was now the savior of his entire family. 22 years after Joseph had been thrown into a pit, father and son were reunited. This is the power of God's plan. What man meant for evil, God turned into good. Jacob's journey from deceiver to patriarch, Joseph's path from pit to palace, these are not just ancient stories. They are reminders that God is working even when we cannot see it, even in our darkest moments, even when everything seems lost. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel to continue exploring the incredible narratives of the Bible. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story is not over, that betrayal can become blessing, and that God is always faithful. Until next time, remember, your pit is not your prison, and your past does not define your purpose.